On today's show, is Apple slowing down your device so they can sell you a new one? I'm iCave Dave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you. And if you want the latest Apple leaks, news and rumours every weekday at 12 UTC, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring my bell. So yesterday Apple released iOS 15, watchOS 8, iPadOS 15. They didn't release macOS yet. tvOS I think is out there. The HomePod stuff. It's not called HomePod OS, just so you know. But this feels like a bit of a non-event to me, and this is mainly because, as an enthusiast and somebody that talks about the new stuff all the time, I've been using it since June, because I've had the developer betas and the public betas on my stuff. So it's not that exciting for me, but I understand it is for a lot of people out there. So if you've got any questions about the new operating system, then do leave them down in the comments. There are some changes. Safari, moving the menu bar around. There's some nice redesigns to that. Apparently, the redesigned Safari for the desktop is coming to Big Sur as well. That's interesting. But the first question we have today for iCave Answers is from Rob All, who asks, iCave Answers, my iPad became 3 to 11% slower after upgrading to iPadOS 15 from 14. Geekbench 5 scores are 11% slower on single core, 7% slower on multicore, and 3% slower on compute metal. Anyone else? Planned obsolescence from Apple? Now, I don't know which iPad it is that you've got, but every time new features are added, it does put more load onto the processors. However, that being said, when I upgraded from iOS 14 to 15 with the betas on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, we actually got better scores on Geekbench. So it does depend, I think, a little bit on how old your iPad is, how recent it is, possibly how much storage is in use. And if you've done your testing immediately after upgrading, then the system may well be doing some indexing and making sure that everything's in the right places and still kind of finalising the update. So at least give it a couple of days before you test benchmarks on these things. But if you do it immediately after you've updated, or even on a newer device, you'll probably get a lower score because the system does need to make sure that everything is in the right places. So it could be just moving files around in the background, could be indexing files, could be doing all that sort of housekeeping stuff. So I wouldn't worry just yet. But if anyone else is having this issue and wants to post up some Geekbench scores down in the comment section, I would be glad to take a look. But do include what device it is, not just iPad. In terms of planned obsolescence, though, it makes absolutely no sense based on what else Apple does. When you look at the Google ecosystem and you look at what goes on with Android, if you pick up an Android phone, you are likely to get a year or maybe two kind of software updates for it, like major software updates, whereas the iOS 15 still runs on iPhone 6s and iPhone SE, the original one. So I don't think they're trying to cripple it so that you buy something else. They're literally keeping the software around for 6 years after you bought your device and still giving you updates. So it's not that they're trying to stop you from having it. Greg West asks, iCave Answers, with the NAB, that's the National Association of Broadcasters show, cancelled for this year, how or when might Apple reveal the rumoured update for Final Cut Pro? So we are expecting another event later on in the fall. My money, as I've said in the past, is on the 12th of October. I think that makes the most sense. And it's quite telling that we didn't see really anything. In fact, I don't think we saw at all Craig Federighi, Air Force One, Apple's SVP, I think, of software design. So that suggests to me that even though we're getting hardware in terms of the M1X Max, I think that we are very likely to be getting some big software bumps, not in terms of macOS, because obviously we know what's happening with that already, in terms of the software that will run on it. So I think the Pro apps, Final Cut Pro, iMovie, Logic, GarageBand, all of that kind of stuff is probably going to get big updates that haven't been talked about already. And the reason I think this is partially because we are due for an upgrade of Final Cut, and I think it will go to 11, but also things like the cinematic video mode that Apple has introduced for the iPhones. There needs to be a desktop way of editing those clips and changing the focus points in an easy way, which is exactly what Apple normally does, is make everything easy. So I would say my thoughts are that it will be at the October event. That's when we'll see the new version. I think it will probably be available to upgrade, possibly same day, for anyone that already owns it. And I think they will probably bring in a subscription model of some sort, whether it's an add-on pack type subscription, or if it's going to be you have the option of subscribing to the software rather than buying it, if that's what you want to do. But we will see. John asks, I gave answers. As a fan of Apple's mid-range items, I agree that the SE is probably the best value Apple Watch for most folks. Looking into it though, I realised it's got the same chip as the Series 5, so would it be worthwhile to pick up a used Series 5 and get the always-on display? Would battery be likely to be too degraded? This would be my first Apple Watch. Thanks and keep up the good work. So no, that is a very good point, and you would get your EKG and things like that. I don't think the battery is going to be super degraded, but that is something that you can check if you are picking up a used one. I don't even know what mine is. Let's have a quick look while we're here. So mine is the Apple Watch SE. Can I check my battery health? Let's have a quick look. I've got a feeling it's around about 95% on here. Battery health, 93%. So this has been going for a year, and obviously it does get used literally all day, every day. It does need charging at the moment as well. But I would expect a Series 5 probably to be around the 90%, 88 to 90% mark, which does still mean that if you would have had an 18-hour battery, that you will still have probably around about a 16.5 to 17-hour battery. And because these things charge really quite quickly, you can always just throw it onto the charger for like 15-20 minutes and get a good chunk of extra time that you can use your watch for. I actually think though one of the bigger advantages would be that over the SE you'd be able to get the other finishes, so you could get a stainless steel, or can't remember if they did titanium in Series 5, but I think they probably did. But you could get one of those if that's something that is of interest to you, and they do have a much more durable display because they have the sapphire coated glass rather than the Ion X crystal glass, which is a lot more durable. So that would be the biggest plus for me, especially if you can get that for about the same price as a Series 6 or 7 right now. Hopefully that makes sense. But yes, if always on display does mean something to you, great. I wouldn't care though about that. Kreispendl asks, I gave answers. Now that the bigger iMacs have been delayed to 2022, does it still make sense to put the same chips, including the same graphics, into these machines as they will put into the MacBook Pros? Is it possible or likely that Apple will go with a more of a Mac Pro approach and maybe put discrete graphics into the bigger iMacs? It would feel strange to buy a big iMac in February or March, even later, with the same performance as a MacBook Pro 16-inch. I'm not sure that there's any issues with buying it in sort of April, May next year and getting the same performance as a 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is what's going to be coming hopefully within the next month, because that's exactly what happened with the smaller iMac earlier this year versus the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro 13-inch and the Mac Mini. And typically the iMac is a Mac Mini with a display built into it, so that makes a lot of sense in terms of performance. There's no real issues with that as far as I can see. However, it actually looks more likely that the iMac, the larger iMac, is pushed back to around this time next year, but it would be getting the M2X performance chips, and possibly two of those M2X SoCs, because it looks like that's the way that Apple's going to scale stuff, is by putting multiple SoCs together. Now, in terms of discrete versus integrated graphics performance, I think we're going to find that the Mac Pros, in fact, also include integrated graphics. I don't think we're going to get discrete GPU cards anytime soon, and that's because the way that I think Apple is building this is to scale across multiple SoCs, so you'll be getting the power of 4 M1Xs or M2Xs in parallel, and I think that's actually going to be really compelling. I don't think people are going to care whether it's on its own separate chips or if it's part of the SoC, as long as the performance is there, and it will be. Charlie Nancaro asks, I gave answers, will Apple have a budget version of the XDR display anytime soon? Now, I don't think they're going to take the XDR as it is and scale it down or kind of cheapen it in any way. I don't think that's what they're planning to do, although I could actually see the price of the XDR display itself coming down from 5,000 to maybe 3,000 within the next year, because I do think that it's quite possible that Apple knows what they can do in order to reduce those prices now that they've had a bit of time with making these things. We are still expecting a specific consumer level for Apple display, which will probably be at least around $1,000, if not $1,200, and that is most likely going to use the same panel as the iMac when that gets refreshed next year. So it could be a 32 inch panel, but it will be a little bit more consumer friendly, a little bit more kind of liquid retina rather than the full XDR mini LED, I think. That's my thoughts, at least. Marcin Gavelchek asks, iCave Answers, in your opinion, has Tim Cook made any decisions that Steve Jobs would completely oppose? Absolutely. There's quite a few, and it started very quickly actually after Steve Jobs' death, and obviously we're coming up to the 10th anniversary of that very, very soon. But the iPad mini is something that Steve had said from day one that they did not want to go down the route of having smaller tablets because people's fingers didn't get any smaller. They also then said that if you need a stylus, then you've lost. And then Tim has kind of pioneered the Apple Pencil with his team, which I would guess that if Steve actually saw what it can do, he would be converted, but he was certainly against the idea. The other big things that Tim Cook does a lot of that Steve probably wouldn't is being vocal on political issues and also donating a lot of money from Apple to different causes as they come up, whether that is civil liberties stuff or whether it's hurricane relief or whether it's all those kind of things. Like, there's a lot of places that Tim Cook seems to be very willing to give away some money. Steve was a philanthropist and did give out a lot of money and did support a lot of charities, but he did it very quietly. And it was always what Steve was doing as opposed to being done on behalf of the company, which I feel is more the way that Tim is. And I think Tim's quite outspoken, especially because of the life he had before Apple, in standing up for people's rights. And I think that's a good thing. Just watch everyone in the comments telling me that they don't want to hear about politics. And Dave's Reviews asks, iCave Answers, I'm upgrading to the iPhone 13 Pro Max from an iPhone 6S, and I was wondering what you think of the Magsafe charger. Thanks. So first of all, it's definitely time for an upgrade. Good choice. Second, Magsafe, I think, is just a fantastic technology. I'm very much looking forward to the world where that is what we charge through, and we kind of either forget about using cables or there's no hole to plug a cable into anyway. I don't think it matters, to be completely honest, at this point. Even though I film everything on my iPhone for all of this channel, I airdrop it. AirDrop works brilliantly. So I don't think we need to worry too much about that. And thinking about it now as well, AirDrop uses Wi-Fi direct from memory, which means that it doesn't need to go across your network, which means you don't need to have a particularly fast network to be able to airdrop your files quickly from your iPhone to your Mac, because it sets up its own kind of ad hoc network that it sends it over. So that's another reason that USB-C probably not come into the iPhone. But yes, in terms of the Magsafe charger, I think it's a great bit of technology. I use Magsafe mounts in my car, which also charges the phone while I'm in there. I have Magsafe at the desk. I have ESRs, Halo locks in a couple of places, and I think it's a great technology. As a charger, yeah, 100%. I really think it's great. So go for your life. And everyone worries about fast charging, but if you get a Magsafe mount in your car that can charge your phone while you drive, then you don't really need to worry about making sure that you've charged it quickly before you leave the house. Just let your car charge it for you. Super easy. And at that point, guys, thank you so much for watching. We will be back tomorrow. If you've got a question that you want answered in a future show, hashtag iCave Answers. And don't forget, we can do iCave How To as well if you've got an Apple problem that you think other people might benefit from hearing the answer to as well. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.